This week in the studio, Sean Beckner-Carmichael is joining me, and we're speaking with local journalist Adrian Riskin about the work he does at the Michael Kohlhaas organization, as well as some other publications that he works with. Welcome, Sean, and welcome
Hello.
to District 34, and welcome guest Adrian. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
So Adrian, you work for michaelkohlhaas.org, as well as a few other organizations. Could you elaborate on what michaelkohlhaas.org is?
No, I mean, it's not really an organization. It's just my, domain name.
Okay.
But why Michael Kohlhaas?
Well, it's a novel that I read that really inspired me. Well, I won't say it inspired me. I already felt like that, but it really validated the way I feel about like this kind of relentless and half crazed pursuit of justice, possibly in a way that damages the seeker of justice. Anyway, so I just like the name, that's all. And
all right, but it's interesting how a lot of the work you do does correspond with the novel. So I was wondering if that was the reason you use that, and it seems that's the case.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk with you specifically about something that has gotten little attention that I think might be coming back into the news because of the recent allegations against Huizar, who's been investigated by the FBI. He has been indicted for corruption. Most of the corruption is in relationship to real estate development money, grift. It's been attached now to Eric Garcetti's administration. So I think we're seeing the tip of the iceberg on this. But back in 2018, you did some reporting on the Skid Row Neighborhood Council Formation Committee. So they were looking at adding a neighborhood council for Skid Row. And part of the reasoning behind that was the voter suppression issues, the fact that the unhoused in the city of LA can't vote, and they should be given every opportunity to do that. So there were a host of things surrounding that, and they ended up suing the city of LA. So can you walk us through some of the history on that you think is important? What were some of the outcomes, the beneficial outcomes, and the things that are still left hanging out there that we need to address? And whether or not you feel like some of that stuff was related in some way to the real estate development corruption that we're now seeing.
Okay, so the background, as I understand it, is that at some point fairly recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, the city of Los Angeles passed a law allowing existing neighborhood councils to subdivide into new ones because, the city has grown and the neighborhoods don't necessarily represent the kind of homogeneous interests that they want them to. So they passed this law, and activists in Skid Row, including Charles Porter and Jeff and a bunch of others, have been working on getting a neighborhood council for Skid Row for decades, before it was even possible to subdivide. But they saw this as a chance to put these longstanding plans kind of into place. And so they started following the procedure for subdividing the downtown Los Angeles neighborhood council into a separate one for Skid Row. And what happened is that the D-Link, that's the downtown Los Angeles neighborhood council, absolutely flipped out about this idea. Okay, and the reason is that neighborhood councils serve as sorry, one second. You got to tell me if I'm getting too far into the weeds, because
no, you're not.
No,
this
on
is
this
great.
one, please get
into the
really
weeds.
hard into the weeds.
So,
honestly,
I think that having an explanation on neighborhood councils is really important because they are the conduit, as you were going to say, with the mayor's office. And although they don't have a lot of authority to actually do actions on their own, they do have sway. Like the recommendations they make, I think, can and do change the course when the mayor makes decisions. So I think it's important for that reason. So please get deep into the weeds.
Okay, so with D-Link, D-Link is very different from every other neighborhood council in the city because when developers want to build a project it's not by right, it has some kind of entitlements that they need. Part of the process of doing that is getting community buy-in. And so developers will send their lobbyists to neighborhood councils. Business improvement districts are also popular, homeowners associations, just any kind of thing that sounds like a neighborhood group. They send some guy out there to say, here's our project, and then the group votes for it, they support it, right? So if you're trying to build a skyscraper downtown, but you don't have some of those supports from organizations, it's not going to move forward. It'll cost the council member too much, probably. So This is why they were so worried about subdividing it, because they want to build in Skid Row. That's like, prime.
Right.
They see it as a blank slate for them.
That's been a tasty treat that every council member
with the
has been
amount of
looking at
gentrification that's gone on downtown LA the last 10 years.
Right. You see, there's none of those buildings are in Skid Row, but they want them. And so D-Link is like part of this super well-oiled machine where the developers come in, they make a deal with the council member to give them like, $100 million in whatever public benefit money. Sorry, that's too much. A few $1 million in public benefit money. And then in return, they give them $100 million tax break and they build their thing. And if D-Link weren't there, okay, then somehow this process wouldn't work as smoothly. Okay, so they really rely on D-Link, which is totally staffed by developers and business improvement district employees and everybody who stands to make so much money off of development. Okay, so if Skid Row got its own neighborhood council, they're not going to approve all these things. All right, that part of this kind of process would grind to a halt. They would make a fuss. I mean, they can't stop the projects because, like you said, they're advisory, but they can sure make everything look like way worse than it looks now. Yeah. Okay, so I think that was really the issue, and they hired Rocky Delgadillo as a lobbyist, and Rocky phoned up Jose Huizar, and they had a meeting, and then Huizar pressured, or he convinced, he got done to bend all their own rules, like allow online voting kind of at the last minute, and not make voters re-register, but just take the list of registered voters from the last election who voted online and send them all ballots. They had pop-up polls like outside of the proposed boundaries. I mean, it's just very, very sleazy. And Huizar was running the whole thing kind of behind the scenes. So that's like the backstory of that.
Yeah. So what became of the lawsuit ultimately? Do you know?
Yes. So look, the theory of the lawsuit was that by breaking its own written rules and allowing these voting anomalies, the city purposely stopped the formation of this neighborhood council that their own rules would have allowed. And the main evidence, I don't know the evidence super well, but some of it was that the paper ballots that were filled out according to the rules were overwhelmingly in favor of subdivision, but the voting by electronic voting by people who didn't ask to be registered was overwhelmingly against it. Right. So that those right. So they went to the judge and they said, look, they broke all these rules on purpose. They changed them after the process started. All right. And that's the only reason that we lost. So they asked the judge to throw out all the votes that were taken by methods that weren't allowed. Okay, which would have given them the election, but the judge would, so the legal details are way beyond me, but ultimately they lost.
And I would imagine also, because the neighborhood council positions are also elected, right? I would imagine that those folks not being able to vote in the neighborhood council positions, those positions themselves, is also a problem, because now they're not able to put people on these councils that actually are serving their purposes. I know in a lot of the neighborhood councils across Los Angeles, you see a lot of the same folks that are in chambers of commerce. So they're using it as, I believe, in my opinion, strictly my opinion, as a business conduit. Like, they see these positions as prime only for that reason. I mean, they're unpaid positions, even though they're elected, they're unpaid. So for them, the benefit is that. So it's interesting that you're talking about how they would parade the real estate developer lobbyists through these meetings. That's not surprising to me at all.
Right. And like I said, though, I mean, that goes on all through the city, but D-Link is different in that those lobbyists actually are sitting on the board also. It's like, it's super tightly controlled in this way that no other neighborhood council I've looked at. It's just because the amount of money involved is so huge.
It's huge.
And I do know that there is, I don't have those numbers with me. I do know that there is a number of discretionary spending that each neighborhood council is allowed.
Yes.
Does anyone here know? I think it's 500,000, but
no, it's less than that.
It's like in the 30s. It's like 35,000 or something.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and I would argue that $35,000 in that neighborhood specifically goes a lot further than $35,000 in any of the other districts. would you agree with, I know a lot of people say this about neighborhood councils, and I found this to be true. Everywhere that system exists, what you see is, generally speaking, neighborhood councils are sort of the first step to enter city politics.
Oh, sure, it could be. Yeah.
Would you agree that perhaps that could be a concern as well, keeping people who are generally speaking marginalized, people in those neighborhoods, away from higher offices after the city councils? Would you agree that that's a concern as well?
I'm sorry. So if I understand your question, you're saying because neighborhood council membership is exclusionary to some extent, and also because neighborhood council membership is a path into city government, then they're an unfair, that's what you're asking?
You worded that perfectly.
Okay,
I wish I had done the same.
I'm just trying to understand before I answer.
Yeah.
The answer is that I don't really know. I don't know enough about neighborhood council being a way into government. I think probably being a city staffer is much more common, but I don't, it's just an impression either way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the answer to your question is that would be unfair if that's happening, but I don't know enough about it to know if it is or not.
Yeah, well, there's been some problems. Like I covered a story maybe 3 months ago now, on the Echo Park Neighborhood Council, where one of the members had a Lynch statue on his front porch for everybody to see right after the Robert Fuller incident. And it was really offensive, obviously, to many of the folks in the neighborhood. And when he was called to task on it, he doubled down and defended it. Like, he didn't see the problem with it. He was calling it artwork. And then he made some incredibly racist comments in, what is that website where everybody, the neighborhood, whatever website, where it's just for
Nextdoor.
Nextdoor, yeah. So he went into Nextdoor and made, which I read the screenshots. They were incredibly racist screenshots. He's now resigned, but he wasn't wanting to resign, and he was defending his position. So I think there's been some problems in the neighborhood councils. They're elected officials. The way they elect them is a little bit different than they do the rest of the elected officials. Straight ballots is more like the way the ADEMs are run. So I think there's a problem there. The fact that they're not paid, I mean, maybe they should be a paid position if these folks are going to do some real work on behalf of the areas that they're living in, because this is supposed to be more about community representation, right? Because the city of LA is so large. We're 4 million people. They're necessary if we're going to get all of these areas really well represented in the mayor's office. So there, perhaps needs to be some reform in the system, but thank you for sharing your thoughts with me on that Skid Row situation, because I remember it. And I just remember reading about the online voting and some of the things that had transpired. And it read like a fiction. Like, how could this even be the case if this was going on? But, here we are.
I would say that the thing that you're probably most known for throughout the city is the way that you release documents. You are very gifted, and you release a lot of city documents, many of which are, I guess I would use the term spicy.
These are FOIA requests and what have you?
Yeah, so my FOIA requests, CPRAs, and just sort of all of those things. What's your process for sort of deciding how to get documents, and what's your process of deciding what to release?
Okay, so, but first, listen, I do release a lot of spicy documents, but I also release a lot of super tedious technical documents in large quantities on my archive.org site. So you want to see like 50 gigabytes of film permits, okay? Like, that's where you go, okay? So it's a conscious decision. I mean, the main point of my blog and everything is to get those records out there. I want to publish them, and I do write about them, but I'm not like, a professional writer. I'm not a great writer. I write run-on sentences, and I write really fast and don't revise. because I see the writing part is mostly a way to just like draw people in so that they'll look at the documents and kind of realize the power. This is my main goal, is to just show people the power that public records laws can give them. I mean, you can do like these amazing things. And so I see like my opinions or whatever about the stuff I publish as very secondary. And that's why I publish everything, because like no matter what ridiculous stuff I say about it, like nobody has to take my word for it at all. There's the evidence is right there. So people who disagree with me or think I'm a moron or whatever, it's like, you know, that's fine.
Having access to those documents is a value in and of itself.
Absolutely, it's a hugely valuable. So that's why I do it that way.
And let me just say that I have probably used your documents as a source more than any other organization or any other reporter.
Thanks.
Particularly because you released the raw data, which is so important. And oftentimes, you know, I can go through your website and I can go, okay, what is the background behind something that may not even be something that you specifically are reporting on? But oftentimes, if I want to pull a file, this has happened several times where you already pulled the file. It's somewhere on your archives. And I just want to say, I don't think people thank you enough for that.
And you're also posting these documents on the Prelinger archives? Is that right?
Sorry, no, Prelinger is the one collection on archive, the Internet Archive. It's
okay, but that's okay.
I'm like another one. So
gotcha.
Me and Prelinger are peers, but you know, not really.
So I guess the question is, how do you get all those documents?
Well, I just ask them. I ask for them. You know, I make requests.
But lots of people ask for them and they don't get them. What's your secret?
Well, my secret is, I want to quote Bethel L. Wilson, who's a deputy city attorney, and he is high up in the staff of their CIPRA unit. Sorry, CIPRA is CPRA, Public Records, California Public Records. So he's the one that like has to deal with my lawyers. And usually he just settles, but recently he wrote a reply brief, before we settled. And in the reply brief, he called me a force of nature when it comes to CIPRA because I won't take no for an answer, which I feel like is a compliment, although I think he was trying to.
I would also agree that that's
that is a compliment.
Going back, so what is this brief exactly? What does it entail?
That's not interesting. Listen, believe me.
Okay.
I'm not trying to hide anything. I'll send you a copy, but we don't.
Okay, got it.
Okay, it's technical.
It's something only a FOIA geek would love.
Right. I'm probably gonna. My girlfriend is probably gonna be really frustrated because I'm probably gonna be reading it in bed tonight. If you do send it to me, just so you know.
What is some of the more interesting California public record documents that you've received?
Oh my God.
Or to use Sean's word, what are some of the more spicier?
They are. Some of them are just, they're spicy. You look at them and you're just like, ooh, that's a story later.
Right. I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, that Skid Row Neighborhood Council thing was huge because some friends of mine told me about it. And I ended up getting these emails that proved that business improvement districts were coordinating the effort. And I think that would have gone unseen if I hadn't gotten those emails.